Hi, everybody. This is Patty Toledo back. We are here with Creative Raids again, this time with a full house. This is how I like it. We have Sophia and Charlie with me here today, making sure that I don't talk too much and I allow our guests to talk properly. And I'm super happy to be able to have with us Bobby Wertheim from Kando Factory. Bobby, yay, great to have
Hello,
you here.
hello. Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
Uh, Bobby and I know each other. It seems like forever. It's not
Mm.
that long though, but it just seems
Yeah.
to like forever. Like
I don't know how
and
long, how many years has it been? It feels like a long time, but actually, maybe it's more like 3, 4 years, something.
yeah,
Or
about that.
uh,
But it's just so much happened in the industry in the last 3, 4 years that it
uh,
feels like a decade. Is good
oh,
things though. A lot of really good things
this is
as well. But I want to give you the stage because as the girls know, if I have a problem, stop talking. So Bobby, let's start if you can tell us a little bit about you. We know you really well, but the audience might not. So please give us your life story, Bobby.
okay. Thank you very much. I will take the stage. So, hi, I'm Bobby. I've been in the industry since 2009, which was when I was 28. So I joined the industry relatively late. Which makes me feel like always, I'm like behind everyone, and I need to work harder to catch up, to make up for the lost years. But early on, I was like doing other things. Like I was an antique dealer that specialized in Japanese ukiyo-e woodblock prints. Like Japanese ukiyo-e woodblock prints is like everyone knows that Hokusai wave picture is a big wave. That genre of art was my specialty. And I did like other things, like making TV commercials and crunching numbers for Casio, the manufacturer, the Japanese manufacturer of like calculators and keyboards and stuff. Um, but yeah, I joined the industry in 2009 as a QA tester for PlayStation, and my first game was Heavy Rain, which was a great game, really dark. And I've always said it's like the worst game to test as a tester because effectively I had one scene once a week. So I would play the one scene 8 hours a day for 5 days running. And if the development team was delayed in delivering the next scene, you're on the same scene for another week. So it's just like, ouch. Well, the team next to me were playing Gran Turismo, well, testing, I should say, testing Gran Turismo. There's me playing the same scene again and again for 8 hours. So that was tough. Introduction to the games industry in a way, but like really proud to be on that project and the subsequent projects that I've had the honor of being on. So yeah, I was at PlayStation in my early years. I was there for in total just under 2 years. It was the first 3 months that I was a functionality QA tester, and then the subsequent time I was there, I was an internal correspondence translator. So I was doing all the translation for the business meetings and the summits and the emails that was going on between Japan and the rest of the world within PlayStation. So not in-game localization stuff, but like helping with communication internally. And then I moved to Sega Europe, where I started off as an associate producer, and my first project was Sonic Generations, and I was basically Mr. Sonic from Europe's production team for the following 2 years, where I was on every Sonic project. And by the end of that 2 year period, I was like a senior producer, and I was managing the team and was looking after loads of really cool Sega games coming out of Japan, like the Yakuza series, and yeah, there was like some super cool games that we worked on, Mario and Sonic and all sorts. And then I joined a business planning team, and there I was managing the overall kind of green light process within Sega. So every game that came out of Sega's doors from Sega Europe or Sega America was green lit through that process that I was managing. So it was really insightful in understanding how executives make decisions on games, like why they greenlight certain games and why certain games are being cancelled, and what this overall kind of thinking is like strategically. So that was really, really good exposure to all of that kind of business side of the games industry and helping our internal studios create, like I was facilitating the creation of their midterm plan and making sure that was communicated to HQ, the mothership in Japan. Um, and then for the last stint of my time at Sega, I was part of a new team at the time, that was a new team that was created, that was like one of the co-founding members of. So it was three of us that started it. It was a team called Searchlight, and that's where we met Patty, when
Yep.
I was working for Searchlight. And I was effectively the game scout, going out looking for games to invest in that we could fund and publish and acquire studios as well. So it was a really interesting period, actually. And that's where I was like, okay, I found my niche. I found my calling within the games industry. I love that kind of part of the job, where you get to talk to developers all day long, talk about games all day long, play games, and just like find really cool. It's like, I call it like the like a digital Indiana Jones, right? Like going around the world finding gems, right? Like looking for the treasure. And yeah, so it was really, really cool, and signed some really cool games there, like 2 Point Hospital and amongst other things. And then I joined a company called Curve Games, which is a UK based indie publishing label, and I was the VP of partnerships there. And I was effectively looking for games. That's become my niche, like my thing is like, I would say my superpower is the network, the kind of evaluation, and the closing of deals, of contracts. I've evaluated over like 20,000 game pitches now, so that's quite a lot of pitches that I've been through. And then now I've set up Kando Factory, which is a new company, and the company is nearly to the day 2 months old now, so it's like brand new company. We're like a
Woohoo!
little fledgling of a company. Yeah,
It's official already then.
yeah. It's officially
Yay!
incorporated. I'm like very, yeah, and we made
Congratulations.
money already. We've actually like generated revenue. It's unbelievable.
Nice.
Holy moly! For the listeners, is Bobby and I have been catching up on Kando when it started the inception of it. So I'm very proud that I was able to see it being born. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's super cool. And thank you for all the time that you gave me during the whole
Always,
process, Patty.
always. Uh, But so I there is an elephant in the room that I'm gonna go back later, which is the fact that you work with the Japan and Sophia is in Japan. I am a fanatic with like at some point on this conversation we need to talk about Japan because I'm gonna feel like something is missing in the conversation. But that's a little thing on that. But you when you say like you said you found your calling on scouting games and I kind of have a feeling that this is a very fruitful career and also really painful at times because you also have to shatter some dreams when you're talking to people, like be doing that reality check with indie developers of saying, look, this is great, this doesn't work, can be complicated. So could you talk a little bit about the process of finding the right games and how to actually do this communication with them in a way that is constructive instead of breaking people's hearts in every way of the process?
Absolutely, yeah. So, like for me personally, um, the evaluation of games, it feels like it's going full circle back to the kind of evaluation of art and antiques, and going out looking for antiques to buy and then put into my store and sell to my regular clients and blah blah blah. So like it feels like an extension of it to me, even though it feels like two polar opposites. Like one's like really old analog, and then the other is interactive digital media, right? It's like polar opposites, but then actually there's some commonalities for me. Anyway, in terms of, I think the key thing that I want to get out there is an understanding within the game development scene, within the indie scene, of just how many games are out there being pitched to potential investors, and how good you have to be able to make sure that you stand out from the crowd, head and shoulders above the rest, and make people believe you're the team, you've got the game, and they back you, right? So on average, for the first few years, I was evaluating about 3,500 games a year. And then last year, I evaluated 5,000 games between me and the team that we had at Curve. So it was like we get through a lot of games, and I track meticulously, like what we've looked at and why we've said no, and what where we felt it was, why it was exciting, and why ultimately it was no, whatever. I track everything, and then, well, I used to anyway, not today, not anymore, thankfully. But I felt like I had to, and so I always did. And not many scouts do track to that degree, from the sounds of it. So I think, but generally speaking, everyone does look at loads of games, right? All the publishers are looking at hundreds, if not thousands, of games a year. But we all know there's only so many games that comes out the doors of a publisher, right? So a really busy publisher might have a game a month coming out, any more than that, and they've got to be a massive machine to be able to support that, or they're punting out the games and not really able to give it like a real focus as a team. So and more commonly you're seeing maybe like 3 to 6 game releases a year from one company, but what they all have in common is they're seeing hundreds, if not thousands, before they actually sign a game. And I would say the signing rate is probably between 0.2 to 1%, 1% being really, really high. So you're at best 1 in 100, if not 1 in 500, right? So you need to be that good to actually make sure that you stand out. And in terms of the evaluation process, I think it differs from company to company, like their structure and their strategy of what games they're looking for and how they'll ultimately make the decision on whether they sign the game or not. The process that I ran was really, really robust. It was extensive. So one of the most robust process I had, it was like a end to end from receiving the pitch to actually signing would on average take 6 months. And then the quickest I've ever been able to sign a game is, I think it was 31 days, calendar days. So we're able to sign a game really, really quickly when we wanted to move quickly as well. So what you have to take account of is A, there's loads of games out there that you're going up against, so you need to be that good. And B, it takes time to sign games quite often. Even the quickest is a month. Really, that doesn't happen often. Really, you should expect it more like 6 months to get your game signed. So make sure you've got that runway to be able to account for the time it takes to receive that investment. And just because your game's signed 6 months later doesn't mean you get paid 6 months later. Quite often it means you need to then deliver a milestone, then invoice, then wait for the 30 days potentially to get paid. So you might be 8 months away before you actually receive a check, potentially, right? So it's really important you take in account the effort you have to put in to A, get signed, and B, the time it will take for you to receive the money. So make sure you have that cash flow. Like in terms of how I rejected people and how often I rejected people, it's like 99% of the games I looked at I had to reject. And I think that's the same for any publisher, pretty much, that they're going to be rejecting most of the games they see. Like literally 99% of the games they see, they'll have to reject. And I tried to always make sure that I was really quick with saying no, because I think developers will prefer to know it's a no and be able to know where they have to focus their effort, which lead to follow up with. So I'd like to give a quick kill. Sometimes we joke that we were like baby killers, right? Because every game is like a baby to a developer, and we're just causing a massacre every day. We're just like killing babies everywhere. Just horrendous job in that sense. But so I tried to make sure it was quick and it was concise. Tried to not fluff too much in my responses, and where I thought, okay, there's actually someone that I know who's looking for a game that's really similar to said game, I'll try and connect them and see if they could actually get signed by someone else if it's not by me, or maybe I can connect them to a certain expert that would help them along their way to deliver their vision effectively. And more than one game got signed in that way, where I was kind of making the introductions, which is really, really nice to see that it's, they were able to find a home for their game, right?
Nice. So if the girls don't ask questions, I will involve them in a
Well,
question now.
oh, okay. Yeah, well, I was actually going to ask one thing, Bobby,
Yeah.
because, like, obviously, throughout my career, I've acted as both a scout and as the head of the Big Indie Pitch. So I've seen games, I've gone out and found games, and I've also had lots of games come to me, as I've seen thousands as well. Like, throughout your time scouting, because I think this is interesting for people listening, what would you say the percentage is of you getting out there and discovering those games at shows versus people sending you their pitches? Like what kind of mix do you often see in your roles?
So out of the 5,000 games that was evaluated last year, 1,000 were inbound. Just over 1,000 were inbound. Probably like 1,050 to 1,100 was people sending their pictures to us, and then the rest were us going out there looking for them. So around 4,000 of them we went out looking for.
Yeah, it's what I thought because it's it's the way obviously I was scouting as well, and I think the reason why I kind of wanted to bring that up and just sort of reaffirm what I was thinking, but is also it does sort of highlight the need to get yourself out there. It's getting getting in with the public. I'm doing a mentoring program again now that I've done for a few years, and one of the lessons that I have to try and encourage people is it's not as simple as just sending a deck to a publisher. You also have to do a lot of networking. You have to get to the shows. You have to be a part of the industry. And yeah, and it just shows there.
Completely, I couldn't agree more. I think definitely get out there, and sending your deck is definitely a good start,
Yeah,
but getting in the face of people and getting to know them and building a relationship and a rapport, and being making sure that you come across as someone that they want to engage with, right? And that maybe they can help, like genuinely they might be able to really help you. So just because they've said no, I wouldn't treat that as, all right, well, I'll flip the bird figuratively and just be like, I won't talk to them again. Just be like, okay, what can I take away from this no? What can I learn
yeah,
from this no? Why was it a no? If they've explained it, great. If not, maybe you could ask. Don't expect a full report though, because they're having to say no
yeah,
to so many. So try and take away what you can from it, and also try and maintain a relationship, because quite often people will be more than willing to look at a game again, right? Just because they've
yeah.
said no once, they wouldn't be like, oh, I'm never looking at it again. They'll be like, no, actually, let's check in again in the future when you've got a stronger build or whatever it might be. So there might be a really good opportunity to re-engage again. So like build on that relationship, even if it is a no. I think it's well worth it.
Yeah, it's not like a job interview. It's more like, I say this to the people I mentor, and it's like it's more like a no, not on this occasion, or maybe it's no, not with this game. There's nothing like in the future. Maybe you've released 3 games, you've learned a lot, you've done some self-publishing. Now you come in with maybe it's your third or your fourth game, and you're like, I'm going to pitch it again. Well, pitch it again, definitely. It's you especially if you maintain, as you say, that rapport with people. It's like and it's also I think the greater the connection and the trust you have is something links to what you said before, is the idea that if you have that trust, even if the game's not right for you, but that these developers are pretty good, that's where that whole but I know another scout who's looking for this sort of game comes in, because you want to know that you can trust that developer and what they're building if you're going to recommend it to someone else to check out. So yeah, I do say a lot, it's like no doesn't mean no forever. It's like no, like either not on this occasion, not this time, not with this game, but it's not no forever.
I couldn't agree more. Like I've been nodding emphatically as you talk there, Sophia, for those listeners out there. Like it genuinely, it's about building a relationship, right? So yeah, I,
Yeah,
I totally agree.
I have two questions. One slightly off topic, but harks back to what you said before when you introduced yourself, and the other is a very cheeky question, which I'm going to ask first. Is there a game that you passed on that you wish you hadn't? And you don't have to name particular names, but is there like a white whale out there that you didn't quite grab? And then,
Yeah, there is. In short, there's loads of them. There's loads of them. Like because there's games that I quite often when I'm scouting for games and I'm putting it forward to the company, I'm trying to take away my personal biases as much as possible. We all have a bias, right? We all do. But I try to put that aside and go, okay, considering the strategy, the content strategy, this is a good fit, yes or no. And therefore I'm recommending it or not, right? With my personal biases aside. But every now and again, it feels like there's a really good alignment of the content strategy and my personal biases. And I'm like, yeah, we should be signing this game. Hell yes. But for whatever reason, we didn't. Right. And then it's gone on to become a hit. And it's like, oh, God, if only. And then there's occasions where we've actually signed games and then they've been cancelled. And then it's gone on to do really well. Or it's been announced today, not out yet, but obviously it's going to be amazing. And it's like, oh my God, can't believe it got cancelled. So there are those. There definitely are those. Yeah.
But not so much that you wake up in cold sweats in the middle of the night.
Not at all. Because like at the end of the day, these decisions were made with really, really good justifications behind them. And it
Mm-hmm.
might have been completely out of my hands, but still there was a logic behind that decision, which is understandable. And it's a hit driven business. So no one's got we can't predict the future. Had we
Mm-hmm.
known, like we would have probably signed it, right? Or not
Yeah.
cancelled it and continued with the game. But I think there were sound reasons why, whether I agree with it or not, why those decisions were made. Um, and we're gonna have to pick and choose, and we can't choose everything. So it's only natural that that would happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Like you can't predict. It's always going to be a bit of a gamble, but you're doing an informed gamble, so it's a slightly different beast. So the other question goes back to when you're introducing yourself, and you started out as a QA tester. Now, quite a few people get into industry that way. What's the benefit to you having come in as a QA and not as a games design graduate, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, um, I the last thing I was doing before joining the games industry was the antiques thing, and so I was doing the antiques thing and running a successful antiques business. By any measure, it was really successful, and it was growing and it was doing really, really well. So it was like great, but at the same time, I want to follow my passion, which
Mm-hmm.
is games. So I joined the industry and I wanted to become a producer. Initially, I thought what I want to be as a producer. And I was going for all these job interviews to be a producer. And then they were like, okay, like you're running a business and that's like really cool. And you love games, clearly, but do you know anything about game development? No, nothing. I didn't even know what the definition of an alpha or beta was and what the differences were between the two. Like, no, I had no idea. And they were like, yeah, maybe it's a bit early for you to be a producer to like manage a project if you don't know anything about how a game's made. So maybe try like becoming a QA tester first. That could be a really good introduction to the games industry, and you can see if it's something you're passionate about. So I started with QA, which is really at the end of the value chain of publishing, right? QA really only begins towards the end of development. It's a kind of almost polishing up phase, almost, but especially for the bigger titles. And if you're on the publishing side for like PlayStation, you're like right at the end. You're not at the beginning. You're like right at the end. So it was good to see how things came together in the end as it was being finished up and polished up. It was really good to understand like the basic fundamentals of game development but really from the outside where I was, because I wasn't an integrated QA tester within a studio. I was part of PlayStation, so it's like really far removed as you can get almost from game development, but still being technically part of development. Um, so it was really good. It was good insight. I think it's probably one of the best introductions you can get into the industry, because from there on, the world's your oyster. You could go in any direction. If you, like, because QA needs an army of people
Mm-hmm.
today to test games, there's lots of availability for you to get on board. Whereas if you went for like a junior game designer sort of role, or like a junior designer type role, there's not an army of designer roles, right? There's a handful of designer roles within a studio. Sometimes you only have one designer in the studio. So it's like they're a lot more precious. So if you were really kind of like hell bent on, I'm only going to do it if I do this particular discipline, you might find that you're looking for ages and you don't get to the actual dream job that you want to initially. So it might be good to start like me. I wanted to be a producer, but I started in a different discipline, got the core basics, built a little bit of experience behind me, and then I could go on and do the role that I actually wanted to do the industry for. And I did it and then realized this actually isn't it. It's not for me. And it was later on that I realized, oh, this is my calling. I enjoy this. So
Mm-hmm.
only through doing it will you realize it's actually a really good fit for yourself. So I would say get out there, try and secure yourself a job. QA is probably the easiest job to secure in most cases, because you basically just need to understand, be organized, meticulous, logical, and be relatively articulate so that you can articulate what the bug is
Mm-hmm.
essentially what you need to do, and not be a dickhead, right? When you're
Yeah.
going backwards and forwards with the dev team on whether it's a bug or not and whether it's being waived or whatever. I think if you've got some relative degree of professionalism and you're decent and organized, you can do QA. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you're not a great gamer, you could be a QA, because quite often big QA teams will hire people who are really good at games and also people who are terrible at games on purpose. So
Mhm.
don't rule yourself out because, oh, I'm not a very good gamer. It's like, no, you can be a really good tester.
Yeah.
That's you've got like a skill in a way by being not very good at games.
No,
Uh,
absolutely.
I have a follow up on that, but just because I'm curious, is there are a lot of studios nowadays though. Like there is a whole generation of my friends in the games industry that started in QA and localization and then went to work in Blizzard, in Bethesda, in Riot, in Sega. But because at that time and place, all the QA and localization was done in house and they had full departments in, but nowadays there are also a ton of agencies that do that for the so you might be working for Blizzard, but you're not in Blizzard, you're actually working for the agency A, B, or C, and you're external. Does the same career path then still work even if you are working through an agency instead of working inside of the studio?
I think so. In short terms, yes, I think it does work. If you have a big company that's really well known, that everyone knows outside of the industry, I think it means like PlayStation or Microsoft, right? Then I think or Nintendo, like really big global brands that everyone's like people on the street recognizes. Then I think the advantage you have is you can go to outside of games and go into QA into different industries, which quite often is better paid because QA in games isn't as well paid as QA for different sectors. So it does open doors by having a big brand, but if you're like working for like a development service provider that focuses in QA or localization, I don't think that's like a huge detriment either because within that sector you would be well known and it will be really easy to find out who they've got a good digital footprint online. So I think it's not a detriment really, but I think the difference would be if you do manage to get a QA job for a specific studio or publishing label, you know what kind of games you'll be testing, like largely what's in their portfolio and what's in their roadmap. So maybe that way you'll be more motivated if that's your passion and you're like, oh no, but I want to be this within this company, then it could be a really good way into that company. Whereas if you go with a service provider one, it's like you don't know whose game you're going to be testing. Like it could be anything. So maybe there's like that's the sole difference, really.
Nice. And I had the question before Sophia talked that which were I wanted to put them in a conversation, and my idea was to ask you, how do you think events like game jams and the big indie pitch help scouters find games, or even for people that not necessarily scouting games, but they want to start creating that network, start building a career in games. How do you feel this kind of events that nowadays are available, but 20 years ago weren't? How did it change the entry level of in the games industry?
You
Bobby?
point that to me.
Yeah.
I thought that was like I thought that was for Sophia and Charlie. Sorry.
No,
Okay, okay, we need to cut this
no,
bit out.
it's
No,
just
that
because
was like a really
they
awkward
are
silence, wasn't it?
yeah, they are the ladies that bring these things to life. So I was
Yeah.
just praising them, but yeah, the answer is yours.
Okay. So we'll pretend this bit didn't happen, and I'll
Oh, I'm not gonna edit this out. This is too funny.
so for me, there's different leads. Like there's different ways that I generate leads, and these kind of things are definitely within the kind of legitimate. This is what I look for and how I find games. And if I speak about high level how I generate leads, I'll split it like along a spectrum of me being proactive and me being totally passive. Right. So me being super passive would be things like literally doing nothing, and then people in my network will recommend games to me, or developers will approach me through the website and make a speculative application and submit the application through the company website. So I did nothing to get that lead, which is fantastic, but also really random because you don't know what's going to come in, right? And then the more proactive I am, the more like focused it becomes. Like so quite often um uh the analogy I use is like the really passive stuff is like throwing a net, casting a net, going fishing, whereas me being really proactive is like throwing out a line to do fishing. So I'm like, it's like a sniper almost, right?
Mm.
And so super passive is me doing nothing. And then along the way of that spectrum, it'll be like going to events, trade shows, taking part in specialist game focused events, like such as the ones that you guys run. And then there'll be uh, like on the really kind of most proactive, it'll be specific like desk research. So I'll look at, okay, this is our content strategy. We want to look at these types of games, whatever that type of game is. And then I'll look online on, okay, who's the people who are doing the best in that field? And I'll write to them and do like a cold call almost with emails and reach out to them proactively. And that way it's like really managed in terms of what content generation leads I'm creating, but also it's the hardest in a way because they're like not prepared. They're not necessarily looking for that kind of
Mm.
opportunity. So it's like, okay, so build a rapport, build a relationship, and over time, hopefully the stars align and we get to work together, sort of thing.
Nice. But
Yeah, I was
go,
thinking.
Charlie.
So obviously, we all go to events. We are all different fields of gaming. That doesn't stop people approaching me and asking if I want to invest in their Web3 game, things like that. Um, in terms of a young, hungry company that you've got your game, you're looking for a publisher, you're looking for funding. What advice would you have for like being at these events and approaching people who are not me, because it's not what I do, so I can't help you in that terms, but I might be able to, recommend someone else, or for someone to approach you with their game
Yeah.
and their
So
do's and don'ts.
yeah, definitely. There's basically don't launch into your pitch straight away. Like break the ice, get to know
Mm.
each other a little bit, spend a good 5 minutes or so getting to know what it is that person on the other side of the table or who you're talking to is your listener, the person you're engaging with. Who are they? What do they do? What makes them tick? What makes them excited? How and what are they doing in the industry? Because then you'll know, okay, these are the kind of things that this person's excited by. And maybe I can really underline that part of my pitch to really get the message across. And we speak the same language, but we just didn't know it yet, right? But if you don't
Mm.
spend that time to get to know that person, you might launch into your pitch and spend a lot of energy and time that's completely wasted because it's just not at all relevant in any way. So do a little bit of like ice break, rapport building, get to know the other person, and then if it's appropriate, you'll know, oh, I'll go into detail, and you'll know like the level of detail you need to go into as well. Maybe you need to only spend 5 minutes talking about it, or maybe this is actually a really an important one that you should. It's so relevant. You should spend at least half an hour and say to the person, "Can we just find a quiet corner and I can show you with my laptop, and maybe I can even get you to play the build if you've got the build there, right?" So
Mm.
spend that little bit of time up front to find out, is it the right budget range? Are they even looking for games? And how and why you should be talking to them about your game before you launch into it, for sure.
That's great advice.
And as I told you, half an hour flies. We already
Yeah.
get it. But I have a bonus question if you can. I promised that before. So, what is your favorite Japanese game?
Oh wow. Okay, that's
That's the hardest question of the
Mm.
century, but
yeah.
it has to be Japanese specifically because I know you worked so much with Japan. So, what is your favorite Japanese game?
Okay. So the game that made me identify as a gamer was Gran Turismo, or that series, right? Because I was spending an unhealthy amount of time playing Gran Turismo games when I was like in my early teens. Um, and so racing games have always been really have meaning to me. And I grew up with Japanese games. So there's a lot of like nostalgic Japanese games that I love too. But then in my adult life, in my working life, I would say the Japanese game that I worked on that legitimately I was like, I love this is the Yakuza series. Like I
Mhm.
love the Yakuza series because it's so silly and but it does silly very seriously. Like it's so good, and particularly Yakuza 3. That was the one that brought me to tears, and I was playing with my wife, and we were both crying at different points in the game because it moved us emotionally. And I just think the Yakuza series is fantastic. With 3 being like ultimate cheese, it's so good. It's like I love cheesy stuff, and it's like this is good cheese. Yeah.
Mhm.
I love that you say Yakuza, because Sophia and I, we fought the pandemic and the boredom of not able to go around, right? So by walking around, it's not Shinjuku, but
Well, actually, I love Yakuza 6, and I recently actually went to Onomichi just to have a look around, like the actual place down in Hiroshima Prefecture. So yeah, like that's how much I love Yakuza. I just like, oh, I'm gonna go to Onomichi. Let's go and have a look round. But it's just exactly the same as it is in the game, this sleepy town. It's great.
It's so
I
good. Like, so I'm half Japanese, and my Japanese side is from Hiroshima, which is,
Oh,
where
okay.
six
Yeah,
is basically Onomichi is, one of the
yeah.
maps that you go to, and it's I think that game and Yakuza 3 goes to that one goes to Okinawa.
Okinawa,
Yeah,
Tanaha. Yeah.
yes. And we went there last year as a family, and I was just like, oh my God, this is the place.
I played the one, and I used to live in Kabukicho. So where I walk around on the game, I actually find the building that I lived in Japan. It's like it's exactly there. It's really good if you're like so sick of Japan, then you just play. And sometimes I'm not even playing. I'm just going around beating people, because of course everybody wants to beat me. There is no way around that. But then walking around again. But Bobby, thank you so much. This was absolutely lovely. I feel we could talk for another 3 hours. we You have to come again for us to talk
Yes,
some
part two.
more, please.
Yeah.
I'd love to. This was a real pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank
Thank you
Oh,
you.
very
thank
much.
you. Thank you.
And guys, thank you girls again. Great help, and we see you soon.
Yes.
Bye bye.
Bye.